Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Monsul, the creator, the host, and the producer of this program, which is called Communicating Today. We've been on Channel 10 for a long, long time, well over 600 programs. We go all the way back to 1990 when we did our first show, one of the longest running programs right here on Channel 10. For those of you who watch us on a regular basis, you know we come on 3 times every week, every Wednesday evening in prime time at 8:30 p.m., every Friday morning for you early birds when you're driving to work. And you probably can't see my show, and you shouldn't be texting or doing emailing either, but concentrating on your driving. But be that as it may, we do come on Sunday afternoon at 3:30, so 3 times every week, and I've been doing it for a long, long time. I think we have a terrific program for you tonight. In fact, I know we do. We have a very, very special guest who's been on our show before, 3 times previously, and this is his 4th time. This gentleman is sitting right alongside of me, and I'm very proud to introduce him. He's my good friend from Great Falls, Virginia, Mr. Rob Jolles. Rob, welcome to our show again. Thanks, for the 4th time. Nice to have you on our Communicating Today. We're going to be talking about Rob's brand new book. This is his 5th book. He's written 4 previous books. He's a great communicator, which is why I love to have him on the program. He's a very enthusiastic kind of guy. He gets me all excited. He gets my juices turned on because he really knows how to be enthusiastic, which is what we're going to be doing tonight, talking about this wonderful new book. We're going to be putting the cover of his book up on our screen periodically during the course of our half-hour show. And we're also going to be putting his website up on the bottom of your screen periodically, which happens to be www.jolles, JOLLES.com. You'll see it periodically, so if you want to have any questions, if you want to get some information about any of his 5 books, and certainly this newest one, which is entitled, by the way, How to Change Minds. That's a very provocative title, Rob. How did you come up with that title anyway? That sounds very interesting and exciting.
Well, the funny thing about titles is that it goes through a creative process, and just like anything else. And I think at the end, we're very happy with not just the title, but the cover. Yeah. And what's nice is sometimes authors, we get a little bit stubborn and we see it one way. But one thing I love about this publisher, Barrett Kohler, is they go through a process with a design team, a graphics team, and together you collaborate. And we went through 16 covers and a number of different titles, and in the end, I think we got it right.
And I think you were telling me that the publishing company reserves the right for the author, namely you, to make the final selection or final choice. If they come up with a dozen different titles or different covers and so forth, and you don't like it, you can nix it and say, no, I don't think I want to do that. I'm going to come up with something of my own. Does it work kind of like that?
It does, and how refreshing is that? Because I've worked with some very big publishers, Simon & Schuster being one of them. It's a great publisher, but Simon & Schuster will say, there's your cover. Enjoy it, and there's your title. Yeah. Basically, the author owns what's inside the book, but the publisher really controls the outside. BK's a little bit different. They really want to collaborate. They want to get it right. And like I said, a number of meetings and 16 different covers and titles, and we ended up with this one, and it's doing real well.
Now, this book, the title of which, How to Change Minds, maybe if you're dealing with your publishers and they come up with something that you don't necessarily like, the cover or the title, is there any way that you can incorporate something from your book, How to Change Minds, and talk to the public and say, I think I can change your mind. I think we should do something different here.
Well, the key is don't tell them what you're doing. So, the basic premise of that title is the art of taking an idea and planting it in somebody else's brain and having them feel like they thought of it. Yeah. And before that scares anybody off, please understand that right under the title of this book is The Art of Influence Without Manipulation. So we won't manipulate, but we'll try and influence, because in the end, I think it's going to be good for the publisher and the author. So we'll do what's necessary.
Before I go any further, Rob, I know we have a wonderful lady sitting out in our studio audience, your wife, by the name of Ronnie Jolles. Ronnie, welcome to our show. We hope you're having a good time out there, enjoying how your husband is performing, and certainly how I'm doing. But again, thanks for coming, and we hope you enjoy the show. Now, anyway, Rob, let's get right into the meat of the book here. And I know you write about the art of influence and something called manipulation. That sounds like a kind of a nasty word. What kind of what's that all about? What's the difference between those two terms?
Yeah, and I have to tell you that a lot of people were very uncomfortable with even putting the word manipulation on a book cover.
Sounds kind of strong.
It does sound strong.
Yeah.
But I think part of learning how to change somebody's mind is understanding that we have to influence and we have to learn where the line of manipulation is. So we can influence without manipulating people. And the funny thing, John, is that the definition it's a challenging one, and yet it's a simple one in my mind. And I define it this way, very simply. When what you're doing, when the intent is for just you, then you're manipulating another human being. But what if we try and change somebody's mind and it doesn't serve me, it serves the other person? What if we can get a drink of alcohol out of somebody's hands? What if we can get the car keys from somebody who's too drunk to drive? You see, the tactics won't change, but the intent changes. And to me, that's why we have to put them both on the cover. We have to explain it very carefully, but we have to explain to people that it's okay to ethically influence another person. We'll just keep that manipulation. We won't make it just for you. We'll make it good for them. If we do that, then I think influence is just fine.
How does the act of trying to influence somebody to change their mind bother some people and it doesn't bother other people?
I think they're uninformed. I mean, I have to tell you that the reason why I'm excited about this book is I know it's going to upset a few people when they see that word and they think, oh, I don't ever want to influence another human being. Really? Well, I have aging parents. We see situations all the time where we see people in dangerous situations and people are too afraid to actually get their hands dirty, ask difficult questions, and potentially offend someone. So they don't. So that loved one takes a fall. That loved one hits another car. You see, once it becomes a big problem, we'll get the car keys. We'll make that choice for that individual, that difficult choice, to be in an assisted living situation. But sadly, it seems like we have to wait for a tragedy to occur to make that happen. I believe it's okay to influence people, but one of the things I need to do in this book, and I tried to do desperately, was to say, let's look at the line. Let's look at the line between influence and manipulation, and let's not be afraid anymore of that term.
Yeah, right. What do you think the biggest reason is that people do resist change? And I wrote a couple of words down here, Rob, you may or may not agree with me, but I said maybe from a standpoint of pride, they say, well, I don't want him to change my mind because I have a mind of my own. I think for myself. I can stand on my own 2 feet. And why should this other human being come along and try to influence me or manipulate me to change my mind to do something else other than what I want to do? So I have too much pride to let that happen. And another thing is, a fear that could happen is out of fear. Well, what happens if I change and it doesn't work out? And what happens if I get into trouble and some negative things happen? So I'm afraid if I let him change my mind, something bad might happen, something evil might come out of this. So I'm not going to let him change my mind. So I just wrote the 2 words down: pride and fear. Now, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but maybe it's in your book. So why don't you go ahead and tell me what you think?
Let's take both of them.
Pride and fear.
Absolutely. Pride, you're absolutely right. It's one of the reasons why we'll never enter a situation and say, John, today I'm going to change your mind. Right off the bat, I think there would be people who put their arms up. And actually, one of the chapters in here is the art of trust. I'm not changing your mind till I create trust. So if I create trust and allow you to paint the picture and allow you to discover, basically you own the situation, I don't think we're going to run into the pride issue anymore. So I think we've got that one checked off. Yeah. So let's go at fear. I happen to absolutely agree with you. I think without question, the biggest obstacle is fear of change. Yeah. People do things and once there's trust, they'll actually admit, you know what, you're right, I'm not doing this the right way. But what if working your solution makes it even worse? I think I'll stick with not so good. And so there's that paralysis, the fear of the unknown. The fear of change is huge, and it's one of the reasons why not only do we create trust, but we have to create urgency. Yeah. We have to say, you know what, we can wait for this to become a big problem, or we can have a conversation about it. And if we do that, if we go through some of the tougher tactics in this book, I think we can help people get over that fear of change. Pride, we got taken care of. Fear of change, John, you hit it right on the head. It's the biggest one, and I think it's the most challenging part of this book, but it's in there.
And I guess, too, another aspect to this, Rob, could be that in asking or trying to influence a person to change their mind on something or other is to make it seem as though you're not forcing it upon them, you're not instituting change against them, but you're trying to make it seem as though they're making the change. Put the change in their hands and say, let them feel as though they're the ones that are instituting this change, and it's not something that you're forcing down their throat and overly influencing to do it, but make it seem like it's coming from them. It's their decision, not so much you making them make that decision.
Absolutely.
Come from them, not from you.
Sure. You know, there's a part in here, I think, where I write a little story called We Have to Pitch the Pitch. Yeah. Gone are the days where I'm going to pitch you a solution. That's the one, the pride's going to get in the way, John. The fear of change is going to be big. They're not going to own it. Yeah. But you're right. What if we, through our questions and through that trust and urgency, what if we lead somebody down that path to change? It's, in my opinion, it's one of the most compassionate things we can do for another human being. But it's tough work. It's easy to pitch a solution. Yeah. We see it all the time. Yeah. That's the easy job. The hard job, the one that takes hard work, guts, determination, is to come up with the questions and to skillfully take somebody down that path.
You know, you and I were talking before the show, Rob, and then we were bringing up, I mentioned to you I was going to bring this example up during the course of our 30-minute show. We only have a half an hour, so we're probably getting close to the midpoint now as we speak. In the news media lately has been this question of naming the Washington Redskins. Now, a lot of people seem to be offended by that, and especially the Native Americans around the country, and they're not a huge number of them, but there's a significant number of them, say the various tribes around the country, and so we think that the name Redskins is offensive. We would like the Redskins to change that name to something less offensive. So they interviewed Dan Snyder, who happens to be the owner of the Washington Redskins, and they said, well, Dan, what do you think, Mr. Snyder, what do you think of changing the name of the team that you bought a few years ago and paid $500 million to buy them, and they're probably worth over $1 billion now? And would you ever consider the possibility of changing the name of the Washington Redskins to something less maybe offensive to some of these Indian tribes? And Dan Snyder came out and he vehemently said to the newspaper reporter, he said, I will never change the name of the Washington Redskins. As long as I own this team, they will be the Washington Redskins. And he was adamant about that. Now, here's a question, a $64 question. We got to figure out a way, even if we want to change Dan Snyder's mind and to have him consider the possibility of changing the name, or whether or not this is something that, or whether or not there are certain times when you reach a deadlock where you just can't change.
Let me get at that one, John. Let me get at it. This is how we change John Snyder's hand, Dan Snyder's hand, mind. Dan Snyder owns the team, and he has the right to have any opinion that he wants. But I will tell you this.
He's the boss.
He's going to make a whole lot more money by changing those uniforms and logos. The point is this. Dan Snyder's backed himself into a corner a little bit, and that's going to be a very difficult mind to change, although money seems to motivate Dan Snyder. We'll leave that alone for a moment. The fact of the matter is this. It's hard for me to speak on such a complicated issue, but I'll say this. I'm a lifetime Washingtonian. I always believe that if you look at the logo of the Washington Redskins, I think it's a respectful image of an Indian. When I read articles, I see the majority of Native Americans actually support the name in that logo. So I think, like any corporation, what you do is you solicit opinions. It's not who yells the loudest, John. Yeah. It's a consensus. And if ever the consensus among Native Americans was that truly offended them as a consensus, then as a lifetime Washingtonian, I don't own the team, but I think it would be fair to look at another name. Yeah. The only issue is every time I look, they seem to be, as a majority, supporting the name. But Snyder, I think money talks with Dan Snyder.
Absolutely, and I think you're absolutely right, and certainly it's a name that's beloved. And they took a poll, I think, of the people around the greater Washington, D.C. area, of the people, the fans, the people that go to the games, the people that buy tickets and so forth and so on, the people that love the Redskins and have loved them for 40, 50, the last 60 or 70 years that they've been around. And about 80% of the people around the Washington, D.C. area said it's not offensive, it's a good name, it's a beautiful name, we love the name, let's keep the name, let's not change it to something else. But the other thing I just wanted to add was that maybe, and maybe that's in your book, that maybe there's sometimes when you can't change a person's opinion. No matter what you do, it's just like the immovable, what is it,
a movable object.
And,
but I will say this, as the author of How to Change
there's
Minds,
always a way.
I'll tackle any situation, not giving up.
What's this business about decision cycles? It's in your book, and it sounds very interesting and provocative. What's that all about?
Well, rather than write a book and say, here, do this, it sounds like I'm pitching you now.
Yeah.
And I just told you, let's pitch the pitch. What if I could prove to you that people go through 6 separate stages when they make a decision, 3 critical decision points? If I could prove that to you, then why in the world, if we're going to change somebody's mind, wouldn't we start with a conversation from inside the mind of the person you're going to change? It'll allow us to choose tactics, etc. So I can go into more detail on that. I know you're reaching the middle part of your show now.
As a matter of fact, Rob, we just got the halfway signal from Mary over there, our floor director. We go back to the camera for a few seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, I am John Monsul. This is Communicating Today. We've been on Channel 10 for a long, long time. Very special guest sitting alongside him, my good friend from Great Falls, Virginia, terrific communicator, author, trainer, and a whole number of other things. His name is Rob Jolles, and we are putting his website up on our TV screen at the bottom of our screen. He's just written a fantastic new book entitled How to Change Minds. We've been talking about that book, first half of our show. You will be seeing a front cover of the book on your screen periodically during the course of our 30-minute program, covering the full size of your screen, and his website will tell you how you can get the book. In fact, he's going to tell you in a few minutes where you can get it, and we'll talk about that. But anyway, he's our guest. Rob, again, thank you so much for being on our show for the, I believe, 4th or 5th time. I've lost count. Many times previously on our show, always a terrific guest. Very enthusiastic guy, ladies and gentlemen. And you want to bring that little gadget over here just for the heck of it. We have a cute little thing, and I don't know if you folks watching our show and see this little guy. It has a name, and it's called Rob.
Well, it's not a bobblehead. Seeing as my name is Rob, it's called a robblehead.
Robblehead, because his name is Rob, and you'll notice this little guy's head shakes as you've seen these things around at all the toy stores and so forth. And he had this especially designed for him by, I guess, a toy company or the toy designer. Exact replica of what he looks like, and it's got a little tiny note on there, and it says, "I like communicating today." He was nice enough to put that on to promote our little TV show here, which is called Communicating Today. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate the plug. And it also says a couple things on there, something about energy and enthusiasm, which this guy has in spades, and I try to keep up with him and have the same thing if I can. We're talking about his fantastic book, How to Change Minds. This is a cover, and you'll be looking at the cover on your TV screen. Got a couple more things here, Rob. How about something called drawing a line in the sand?
Well, when you study, remember what we were talking about, that decision cycle. So we've got this decision cycle that people go through, and one of the reasons why we outline it is this. I want people to always begin by realizing I'm not providing a straitjacket. People make decisions, not processes. I want to lay out a path, so knowing the decision cycle allows us to begin to strategically figure out what tactics will I need, what won't I need. But that line in the sand that you bring up is from the inside, the decision cycle. It's one of the most critical pieces because there's a stage where people will actually acknowledge they have an issue. Let's take a cigarette smoker. Most people who smoke cigarettes won't tell you, gee, I had no idea, it's not healthy. They'll tell you, I know, one of these days I'm going to stop smoking. Of course, we're down the road pitching ideas, and yet that cigarette smoker stays put. A line in the sand is that first critical decision point that either we as communicators take people over or on their own they cross that line. For a cigarette smoker, a classic would be sometimes a cough. Sometimes it'll be going for an annual physical and the doctor saying, you know, I'm seeing a little bit of a cloud. In other words, we learn that people don't fix small problems, they fix big problems. So once that problem begins to grow, people take themselves over that line in the sand. Now they're committed to making a change. And quite frankly, for people who communicate, that's the easy part. I want everybody to come to me saying, I've decided to make a change. The problem is, at what cost? What did it cost to go across that line in the sand? How many people do we know who drive an old vehicle, who love that vehicle? Then all of a sudden, that lovely vehicle with 210,000 miles leaves them on the side of the road. They miss a big appointment. Now they're ready to get another vehicle. Well, they crossed their line in the sand. I say again, if we understand the art of influence without manipulation, then we understand that if we really want to help people, let's help them before the car leaves them on the side of the road. Let's help them before the doctor sees a spot on the lung. But that's the line in the sand. Usually when people are making decisions, unfortunately, there's a significant event. I just would love to get there before the significant event.
Yeah, there's another phrase that you and I were talking about before the show, Rob, and I wrote down here, and I thought I'd mention it to you. People sometimes, if you're working in an organization, in a company, or an association, or for the government, or wherever you're working, the boss or the manager comes along and they say, this is the way we're going to operate in this company. This is the way we're going to operate in this organization, in this association. We are going to do it this way. It's my way, or it's the highway. Either you listen and do what I tell you to do and do it my way, or you're out of here, you're out the front door, and we don't want to see you back here again anymore. Now, that's a pretty strong and a pretty stringent way to present things. I don't think people that run organizations like that are going to get a heck of a lot of cooperation from the people that work in that organization, because they're going to take one look and they're going to talk about that manager behind their back and going to say, gee, this guy, I'm afraid of this guy, because if I make one bad move, he's going to throw me out the front door, because he said everything has to be stringently done the way I want it done, or else it doesn't work. Now, what do you think about trying to change somebody's mind like that, who has that kind of an approach or that kind of an attitude? You do it my way or you're gone.
Got it.
Your history.
Right. Well, first of all, the cat would not be very happy with that scenario you just drew up, okay? That cat would be eating that mouse for sure. And one of the reasons why I wrote this book was because of that exact reason. What happens to a manager like that, or a parent like
fired.
that? Absolutely. That manager gets fired. That parent, a decade later, runs into dysfunctional family situations. See, no manager is going to survive like that. At Xerox, the company we worked for, once a year, managers were being surveyed by their employees by an outside company. And if those numbers fell out of a certain range, they were either terminated, relocated, or put on a 6-month action, which means, thank goodness, you know what, we're not going to manage that way. We're going to get the buy-in. We're going to take a more courageous route. We're going to change the minds of those that you're managing. We're going to make it their idea. And if we do that, we're going to be a functioning organization with a team that's going to run through a wall for us. But they're gone are the days where a manager can operate like that. And if the company doesn't take them out, they'll be taken out quickly. We can't function as a parent or a manager like that.
Well, terrific. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And now here's another one for you. What is the biggest mistake that most of us make when we are trying to change somebody's mind? The major mistake in trying to accomplish
Okay, well, I could give you a 25, but I'll tell you the one that just came into my mind when you said that.
Big number one.
I would say number one is, it's like a therapist. Even though we see the problem, the biggest mistake we can make is tell somebody what the problem is. In other words, sometimes I say, you can't call somebody else's baby ugly. Okay, they could call their baby ugly. I'm not going to call their baby ugly. No. So we learn how to ask open questions. No. We learn how to earn the right to even ask somebody about something that's troubling them. And then we let them paint the picture. If we do that, then we can lead them through these questions. If I tell you, you keep smoking, John, here's what's going to happen, here's what's going to go on, you can't hear it. You're offended that I am calling your baby ugly, and we won't change anybody's minds. So if you ask me to pick one, I would say we let them paint the picture, and we don't call their baby ugly.
Yeah, I agree, Rob. I think another thing that's pretty important is that make this decision seem as though it's coming from them, as I think we've mentioned that before, and absolutely tell. And I guess there's something called physical characteristics. For example, if you're looking at somebody and you're trying to change their mind and you're going through all the different steps in the procedure here that you have outlined in your book and you've mentioned here on our program tonight, if you look at them in eye to eyeball to eyeball, and you smile, you say, I have a very nice suggestion for you, Joe. And I think what we ought to try to do is think about something, and you look at them with a smile as opposed to a nasty looking, mean looking face. And if you have a tone of voice that's sort of like, Joe, I think this is something that you and I ought to discuss, and we should discuss it, talk about this, and let's think about this in a logical sense. Instead of saying, Joe, I think what we ought to do is, I don't think we're going to do it this way. I think we're going to do it the way, there's another way of doing this other than, but I think, in the speaking organizations like Toastmasters International. I don't know whether you were. I think you were a member. I was a member many years ago, and they tell you all the wonderful things about using gestures and the voice variety and vocal variety and eye contact and smiling and being pleasant and being nice and so forth. But how do you want to comment on that? Maybe the physical
I'd be happy
approach?
to. The first chapter of this book talks about something really important.
Yeah.
It talks about believing. You have to believe what this conversation you're about to have. If you don't, you're right. The face doesn't go, and the words don't go with the tune. So we have to be in the moment. You notice in that Robblehead that we pulled out, 2 words, energy and enthusiasm. On my website, I have a video. It's a free download. And in that video, it goes through the 4 biggest mistakes of influence. And one of the 4 is just what you mentioned. It's not really being locked into the moment. I don't want to be so into a process that I forget to look up and believe what I'm saying. If I don't believe it, we're not going to have this conversation. But forget the words, forget the process, forget the decision cycle. John, if I don't believe it and you see I don't believe it in my face or in my voice, the conversation's lost.
I wish we had another half hour, Rob, but I just got the minute and a half or so warning from Mary out there on the floor. And we do want to mention, absolutely, before this program is over, where can people find this wonderful book entitled How to Change Minds by Rob Jolles? I know it's probably Amazon.com. It's on your web. Find that from your website, which we're putting up, ladies and gentlemen, on the bottom of your screen. Where can we get this book?
It is everywhere.
Everywhere.
I'm very proud to say that. It's at Barnes & Noble on the new release table, and this is my 5th book. I've never had one on the new release table, so when you walk into the bookstore, it's going to be, you'll see the cat and a mouse right there. It's in all the airport bookstores. Obviously, it's online, Amazon. But what's nice about Amazon is if you want to think about this book, there's actually a promotional video that just lets you to learn a little bit more about the book. So that's a nice thing about being online.
Rob, I got to close it out now. I just got the final warning from Mary. Thank you so much, buddy, for being on our show again for the 5th time. Terrific guest as always, enthusiastic, exciting. Wonderful book, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a copy. If you've been watching the copy on your screen at home or wherever you are in your office, How to Change Minds by Rob Jolles. If you can get it, it's everywhere. Thank you for watching our program. Come back and see us next week. We always go out by saying, keep on communicating for success. And wonderful books like How to Change Your Mind and our terrific guest for tonight's show, Mr. Rob Jolles. Rob, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Come back and see us again, and best of luck with the book. Bye-bye. We'll see you all next week.